Hello, a very good morning. My name is Isabel, and I would like to share my research findings on engaging minds, exploring student preferences in gamified learning. Firstly, a little background to my study. So, as digital education grows, gamification appeals to students with short attention spans who prefer gaming over traditional lessons. And based on studies by Statista and Muhammad Rashid, they found that Malaysian teenagers of 13 to 19 years of age spend only about 1 to 3 hours per week on reading and 8 to 12 hours per week on gaming. And that is really a big amount. And so, therefore, there is a lot of interest to incorporate games in our teaching and learning to motivate, engage, and stimulate learning interest. A little bit about my methodology for this study is that firstly, I would design a questionnaire to have a mixture of closed and open-ended questions. And then a bouquet or a Kahoot game will be played at the end of a particular study area. I teach chemistry, so there are 3 study areas. And quantitative and qualitative responses were collected from a total of 112 Monash University Foundation year students, also known as MUFFY, and they were all taking year 12 chemistry. And the study basically investigates the effectiveness of 2 gamification tools, namely Bluecat and Kahoots. So, a bit of statistical analysis were done specifically using descriptive stats to highlight central tendencies and variability like mode, median, and mean. And the open-ended responses were analyzed with content analysis approach. So content analysis is a particular approach to categorize the responses based on certain themes and common patterns. And in addition, small group interviews were also conducted to gather deeper qualitative insights that cannot be captured via questionnaires. With that in mind, here are some of the results of the gamification studies. So, based on this pie chart of figure 1, I asked the students which gaming platform do they find most effective for enhancing their understanding of chemistry year 12. And if it's just between Bluecat and Kahoot, you can see that almost double of the students would prefer Bluecat rather than Kahoot at 18.8%, but they would actually prefer if there were some games, so both equally, about 42.9% would actually find Bluecat and Kahoot both effective for understanding the tough course material, and a small percentage of the 114 students felt neither were effective. But I think there is a majority of responses that find games actually enhanced their understanding. So besides that, if you look at figure two is the students' perceptions on which gaming platform helps them retain information better after class, because that's what we really want to achieve, for them to remember the information taught. And just between just Kahoot and Bluecat, you can see that there is an extra 11% of students who prefer the Bluecat platform versus just Kahoot, but 37% of the students felt both equally help them retain information. Now, in addition, I also asked them the question about which gaming platform helped them clarify difficult chemistry concepts like, atomic structures and things like that during the lesson. And you can see that again in figure 3, almost double of the students preferred Bluecat only versus just Kahoot only. But both equally, about 40% of the students felt that both equally helped them clarify difficult concepts. However, the chart is skewed in favor of students agreeing that Bluecat helped clarify concepts better, 32% versus just 70%. And based on figure 4 was the respondents' perspective on which gaming platform they prefer during class activities. And there was an overwhelming percentage that felt that just Bluecat was what they preferred as compared to just Kahoot, and a slightly lower percentage, which is 35%, 10% lower, felt both equally. So there is an overwhelming amount of students who really much much prefer Bluecat versus Kahoot for class activities. And figure 5 basically is a simple question about which tool did they felt was easier to use and navigate, so handling usability issues. So for Bluecat, actually, it may not be as user-friendly as Kahoot. Kahoot stands at 30.6%, a slightly better margin as compared to Bluecat. I think the Bluecat, computer programmers may want to work on the usability part, but Kahoot is slightly easier to use. It's more user-friendly, but all in all, 36.9% felt both were equally easy to use and navigate. So this is a screenshot of the different gaming platforms for Bluecat versus Kahoot. As you can see, for Bluecat, they have crypto hacks, they have all this gold quest where it's really fun and competitive for the students. So maybe they do find it really fun, which actually helps to answer my next question about which tool keeps them more engaged, because we know that student engagement is very important, as in our 21st century students nowadays their attention span is very short and they are easily distracted. So between just Bluecat versus Kahoot, you can see that there is an overwhelming majority of students who would much prefer Bluecat at 46% as compared to just 18% for Kahoot, whereas 4% felt both equally helped them be more engaged. All right, so Bluecat was the top platform. However, we need to understand that 33.9% of students did feel that both were equally effective if both were used, at different study areas. And therefore, different study areas would require a different gaming platform, depending on whether I'm testing on trends in periodic table or electron configuration, etc., etc. But games can be used for all subjects and for all years of students. And so, my question 7 was which that they find most fun. And as you can see, because Bluecat is fast-paced, it's competitive, it's time-sensitive, so 15% of students felt that Bluecat was definitely more fun. As you can see, 40% of more students felt Bluecat was more fun as compared to Kahoot at just 8%, and yet a significantly lesser percentage of students, 23%, felt both were equally fun. So, my last question is on what is their view? Which platform motivates them? As you know that we actually want to motivate students to learn beyond the classroom. So, as you can see that a majority of them, standing at 42%, responded they would like to have more Bluecat games, and that's even more than both equally at 40%. For Kahoot, only 13.4% would like more Kahoot games. So, you can see that most students would prefer more Bluecat games in the future. So with that in mind, let's have a look at a little discussion and conclusion. So how I started with this study was that I read a lot of studies that gamification catered to students with different learning styles, from the visual to the kinesthetic, and very few are just auditory. So I started my research in 2021, whereby multiple studies showed positive effects of gamification on motivational and cognitive outcomes in terms of their thinking and as well as their critical thinking behavior. And then I embarked on my studies in 2023, and I found through informal feedback that gamification increased their enjoyment and they participated more in class, even the quiet introverted ones, and it increased their interest level in chemistry, because chemistry is not really the easiest science subject. And so these were also supported and complemented by studies by Helen 2023, which are a Spanish group. And in 2024, which is just last year, I also ran some informal interviews, and it also complemented studies by Jaramillo Mediavilla, which is also another Spanish group, that they found that gamification increased the motivation as well as the test scores of their students. So it had really increased the academic achievement, and that's really something that we want to achieve, that it not only is engaging, is motivating, is fun, but we also want our students to improve in their exam and assessment scores. So presently in my study this year 2025, a big summary and a highlight that I found is that students view gamification effective as a learning tool that is not just for fun, it's not a waste of time. And my findings align with previous research as the studies I put at the bottom. And for future, I would like to explore more gamification studies because a lot of papers also talk that students have greater problem solving skills, which is really important for the workforce of the future, even with the advent of AI as well as a lot of technology in education. So, basically, in summary, I would say that Booket was the preferred platform over Kahoot as there's more positive influences. For example, Booket enhances understanding of material, learning was more fun and engaging for the students. It helped them clarify difficult chemistry concepts. It helped them to remember because some of the questions are repeated again and again in the Booket game, and it really motivated them to really learn more and to understand even calculation questions. So with that in mind, I would like to thank you all for listening to me, and these are my references if you're interested to read more. And here are my acknowledgements. I'd like to thank God, my dear family, my Monash Foundation Director, the senior management, Sunway College and University friends, as well as students and church friends. And these are my funding sources, which are Sunway College and the Jeffrey Chia Foundation. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice day.